Okay, we're going to practice shading with paint. And it's a little bit different than shading with a pencil. With a pencil, when you shade, you can press harder to get darker and then slowly lighten up your pressure to get lighter. And while there are ways you can do that with paint and a brush, you're going to have to mix to make these colors happen. So it's always better to start with the lightest color and get darker. It saves you paint, it saves you frustration, it saves time. So it's always best to start with the lightest color. And in this case, I'm going to start with the white. And I'm going to make a little white section on my paper here that is going to be pure white, kind of like my base. And this is my pure white cup, the sacred white that I'm not going to get dirty by dipping another color into it. So after I get that white down in the direction that I'm going to go, I'm going to make a little tornado here going up. I'm going to put the cover on it so I'm not tempted to accidentally put a dirty brush into there and keep this nice and pure. Then I'm going to take some of my lighter colors. I have the pure green here in a cup, but I'm going to start with some of this lighter tinted paint that I had made in a different demonstration. I'm going to dip into there, and I'm going to start by adding it here on top of the white and blending it in. And as I go down, I may adjust the pressure of my brush to make it lighter, so I'm not mixing quite as much into it. And it's going to remain a little bit darker here on the bottom. All right. I'm blending right on the surface of my paper. Then I may have too much paint on here. And if I dip into that, what I have on my brush may overwhelm the paint that's in the cup. So I'm going to switch to a different brush, or on the side, I can kind of wipe off this brush to get some of that extra paint off. Because if I have too much paint and I'm going to start to blend in here, it's not going to blend very well. So I could get a clean brush, or I could wipe off the extra stuff that I have on there and then dip into my pure color and then start to add that down here to make it look darker on the bottom. And as I blend it right on the canvas, I'm going to slowly adjust my pressure. I'm going to kind of feather it as I go up. And if I want to make it a little bit darker, do you see how I just contaminated that color? It's kind of being overwhelmed by white in there, but that's okay. I planned it that way. And then I'm going to add this still to make it darker. And we're getting kind of a medium tone in the middle. And I'm just lightly feathering it on the top so I don't have as much paint going in up here. So it's keeping it light on here, and then pressing harder to get more of that green to apply on the bottom as I go up. So it's kind of like adjusting your pressure with the pencil. Then I have some darker green here that I had made in a different demonstration that has black in it. And I'm going to just dip my brush slightly. Maybe I want to wipe off my brush again to get some of that extra paint off. And I'm going to dip my brush slightly in this darker color. Now once you start applying black or a shade, it takes it over really quickly. And it also kind of mixes with the white to make a grayer color. So if you don't want it to look too gray, or if you don't want it to overtake and change your tone, maybe you just apply more of the base color, the hue. But with black in it, you can see how I'm getting darker on the bottom, and I'm just tapping it a little bit to blend it. And as I go up into the middle green, I'm pulling up and off the page, so my brush is just like wisping over the top. And that's how I kind of blend it in from dark to light as I go. So you can try that. Now, if I wanted to create like a circle into a sphere, that's a common thing that we do when coloring with pencils or drawing, transform a shape into an illusion of a form. Again, I'm going to start light. Maybe I paint an entire white circle on my page, and that's kind of the base coat. I like to mix it right on the paper, and by mixing it right on the paper, I can have a control over how much to add and blending it as I go. So I always add the white first, and then that's kind of my base tone. Then I'm going to pick up again some of my tint of my green, and I'm going to pretend that the darker side of the circle is over here. So I'm going to start on the dark side, and then I'm going to paint that first and slowly have it blend into the sphere to make it lighter. Now if you oops and you accidentally get too much dark paint, like right in the middle right there, you have to blend that in. And now I still have too much dark paint, right? So then I'm going to work backwards, blending it into this dark side and smoothing it up into the light. And I'm very lightly feathering it in up here to change it to the tint so it doesn't overwhelm it and make it all the same kind of green. We want it to be an obvious difference from the dark side that slowly blends into the light side. And so that looks pretty nice just like by itself with the lighter tint of the green. If I wanted to get a little bit darker on the dark side, again, I might have too much paint in here that will overwhelm this. So I can wipe that off on a piece of newspaper, scrap paper, or grab a fresh brush. Oftentimes I'll paint an entire painting with just one brush. I'll just wipe it off if I don't like the color and then dive back in. So I'm going to pick up some of the normal hue, and it's kind of overwhelming it in this cup. You see how I can't see that color right out of the tube anymore? That's okay, because on the end of my brush, it's right there. And so when I paint, I'm going to blend it in. Now I'm using acrylic paint, so you have to work fast. If that paint underneath it starts to dry, like over here, it's dry already. If I paint over there, I'm not going to be able to blend in with the color underneath it as well. So you have to work so that the color underneath it stays damp while you apply it. Otherwise, it won't blend in as nicely. Even half of this circle is drying out, and you can see, oh my gosh, it's dry. Now what do? How do I blend that in? Right now I have a dark side and a light side. Then you would get a clean brush or wipe off your brush, go back in with your light, and hopefully you can kind of, again, I'm not applying a lot of pressure. I'm just kind of feathering it in on the top just to pick up the tones that I want and blending it backwards into there. And then I can add some more of the light right here and kind of blend it in. I have a lot on my brush. This would be a good time for me to pick up a fresh brush with some lighter tones, lighter tints right here that I know aren't going to blend into the dark too much, or I don't accidentally have a dark color. And I'm also seeing that it's kind of getting too dark. And this might happen to you, all right? If it happens to you, get a clean brush for your white. Don't contaminate your sacred white, your pure white. Add a little bit of a layer down here on top. This is if it starts to dry out. And then feather it in. Again, it's always easier to get darker than it is to add the lighter, and feather it backwards so that we stay light on one side and darker towards the bottom. All right, so that sphere's coming along. If I want to get even darker still, I could add more of the color, the hue right from the page, or I could add some of the hue that has the black mixed with it, this darker shade. Again, if you start adding a black and a white, it's like mixing gray. There's white on this brush, so it's kind of like mixing gray into the green. But I don't think it's going to take over too much. I'm just getting the little edge of my brush in the dark. I'm going to see what that does as I make it darker. If I want to go darker still, I can blend it in. And because it's still wet underneath, I can pull up on my brush as I go to adjust the pressure to make it blend better. All right, and this is kind of like my workspace. You see all these colors wiped around. You might have newspaper on the side that you're wiping off your brushes, making it darker. I could add like a little darker shadow here underneath the sphere to really give it the illusion of a sphere now as a form, as opposed to just a pure circle, and blend that in. You know, I don't like to use pure black ever. This is a black mixed with the green as a shade. Sometimes pure black, it's just a little bit too intense for painting. So I add it like that, and then I can clean up the edges as I go. Whoops, blend that in and blend it back just by feathering it in and smoothing it out. So go ahead and try doing a tornado that goes from dark on one side, light to the other side, and it can be sideways or it can be vertical, dark to light instead of light to dark. And then try making a circle and transforming it into a sphere. It's okay if you try it multiple times. If it doesn't blend like this one very well, try it again, or try adding layers on top of it and keep working towards it. All right, go ahead and give it a shot.